to come by this season. Big news in the NBA. Derrick Rose's jersey will be retired by the Chicago Bulls on January 24th. So that number one going into the rafters at the United Center. Derrick Rose. When I say Derrick Rose to you, what's the first word that comes to mind?
What could have been? That's not a word, but it's a phrase. What could have been? Because Derrick Rose was one of the most electrifying young stars that we saw in the NBA. Even going back to his time in college, he was an absolute blast to watch. But then injury after injury and setback after setback. You see, the MVP season, his Rookie of the Year season. He just continued to build upon what he did year over year until the injury bug bit, and he just couldn't do it anymore. So I can't help but think, and I think that's one of the greatest what ifs in sports, or maybe fair to say, or better to say, one of the most tragic what ifs in sports. What could have Derrick Rose become had he been healthy? So it's unfortunate. But I feel lucky as a sports fan that we got to see at least a fraction of what Derrick Rose was capable of throughout the entirety of his career.
I think that's why I initially my word was bittersweet because of the very things you mentioned. But as you talk, I think more and more the word is human. Like for Derrick Rose to have his jersey retired in Chicago, a city that has such incredible individual player history for different eras, it speaks to how much he meant to the organization, even though he was only Derrick Rose for a short amount of time. Like that's incredible. And then you think about just the human element of what it has to feel like to know that you have the potential, the chance, the opportunity, the talent to be an all-time great, and your body just doesn't cooperate. And, we use the phrase injury prone a lot. And I don't think people are necessarily injury prone, but bodies are bodies. Sometimes, I've talked to injury doctors repeatedly about the fact that the makeup of everybody's body is different. And sometimes one little thing can create a chain reaction that causes injury after injury, and your body just doesn't cooperate. And I cannot imagine how hard it must be for Derrick Rose even to sit down and look at his career, understanding all of the great things he's accomplished and how proud he should be, but also understanding how much he sort of left on the table, how much he wasn't capable of accomplishing compared to what he thought he could do through no fault of his own. And that's just, it's hard. The former athletes I know that played at the highest possible level have so much pride in what they did, but they also all look back at different moments in their career and say, I wish, I might, I could. I can't imagine what that's like for Derrick Rose, who I hope has just tremendous appreciation for what he meant to basketball, what he meant to the Bulls, what he means to the city of Chicago, what he still means today to Bulls fans. But Caroline, I can't imagine that it isn't also tough sometimes to look around and say, yeah, I could have been even greater and we could have seen even more greatness. And so I'm glad his jerseys are going up in the rafters. I hope that we press pause on everything else and just appreciate it's going up in the rafters because he did so many great things in such a limited amount of time.
And I think that's what makes this even more impactful and more powerful is the fact that it was a fairly short period of time compared to the longevity of careers that we've seen from other players, LeBron, for example. It was a fairly short period of time, but it was so impactful that it was so that they want to recognize Derrick Rose's contributions to this franchise as someone who will forever be ingrained in the fabric of that organization, a very, long tenured and a very classic organization. That what he did, albeit a short period of time, was so important and was so impactful, I think makes this even more special. Because I think longevity of careers in and of itself are incredibly honorable. That sometimes players that stick around for a very long time, we acknowledge for just being able to be around for a long period of time. And I think that's special in its own right. But being able to be so impactful in such a short period of time, I think is incredibly special. And I think we're going to be talking about Derrick Rose for years and years and years to come, that he will forever be ingrained in the NBA and Chicago history books, and for good reason.
It also, though, speaks to what's happened to the Bulls. Like, I mean, I joke about my age, but the Bulls and their greatness was a transformative chapter in my life. Like, even if I wasn't a Bulls fan growing up, you still watched those Bulls teams and sat there just amazed at what everybody, not just at Jordan and Pippen, but like half the world became mega fans of the Horace Grants of the world, the Dennis Rodmans of the world, the Craig Hodges of the world, the John Paxsons of the world, like role players that otherwise we wouldn't even remember. It's staggering sometimes when you think that post that chapter, Derrick Rose, that's it. Like the Bulls have never really been able to do anything post Jordan that they can say they can really hang in the rafters that way other than Derrick Rose. And that I think is just, it's a statement to Derrick Rose's greatness. It's just also a statement to the Bulls and how lost the franchise is today compared to a franchise that I grew up thinking would always be, I grew up thinking they'd be as prominent in the NBA culture forever as the Lakers and Celtics are. And that hasn't turned out to be the case at all. Let's get to some other NBA news. Spurs rookie Dylan Harper. This is interesting. Carmelo Anthony's podcast, 7 p.m. in Brooklyn, mentioned that he thought that Harper could follow the same path as Harden. James Harden was with the Thunder, came off the bench for 3 to 4 years, waiting his turn. So everyone's got to wait for theirs. It's kind of funny because we just immediately see a high draft pick in Dylan Harper. And even when he was drafted, people were saying, why would you do that? You have De'Aaron Fox. But to me, Caroline, this makes a ton of sense. Like, slow develop your young guy while you get the most out of De'Aaron Fox that you have and just grow your team organically the right way. I have no problem with this concept.
I don't have a problem with it. 3 to 4 years is a long time, right? I mean, like a 3 to 4 years is the entirety or almost the entirety of a rookie contract in the NFL. So 3 to 4 years, I don't think that I can get totally on board with, but I can start with, hey, we're going to start in slow burn you now. And we're going to let you marinate. And we now feel with you on the bench, we still have a really good shot at making a run in the playoffs. And then that will give you more and more opportunities to learn. I do totally agree with the fact that we in sports have such a short attention span, that we live in a microwave society, an Ozempic society, an iPhone society where we want immediate results right now. And that is to the detriment and probably the downfall of a lot of really bright young athletes. And we can give several examples in lots of different sports, especially ones that don't have some of those developmental leagues like Major League Baseball has. So I don't hate this idea in the slightest. It sounds like it's a dirty word. Development now in the NBA when you have guys that are in college for 1 year and then immediately making impacts for their NBA teams as soon as they get drafted or the first opportunities that they do. But I'm with you that I don't hate the idea of letting Dylan Harper just cook for a little bit when you feel confident in the team that you have.
Especially when you have a Victor Wembanyama. I'm just gonna presume that health normalizes itself for Wembanyama. And if Wemby ends up as healthy as everybody hopes he's, like, that's knock on wood, we're all hoping for that. If Wemby ends up being the healthy version of himself, in the next couple of years, he only becomes more and more and more dominant through all of this. And Harper gets the opportunity to figure that out and how to play best with him over time. I don't hate any of this because, frankly, I think young NBA players, the expectation on them is so wild at times, and it usually doesn't work that way. Give me a little extra grace. Give me a little extra time. I'll take that all day. Also, some big breaking news at this point on Malik Beasley. Malik Beasley has been cleared of federal gambling investigations. Now, remember, he was being investigated on a bunch of bets that came in on some of the games he played, created a real conversation about whether or not he had done something nefarious. He has been completely cleared. Shams saying ESPN story on Malik Beasley receiving determination that he is not a target in Eastern District of New York's gambling investigation, potentially opening the door for the sharpshooter with the second most threes in the NBA last year to resume free agency. According to the Detroit Free Press, in August, he had been offered a $42 million deal, or he confirmed that in August, that he was offered a 3-year, $42 million deal. But the Pistons pressed pause on that with this investigation. It will be interesting to see now that there is no longer, he's been cleared. It'll be interesting to see how much the NBA trusts that, how much NBA fans trust that. This is just the world we live in. Once your name is in certain circles, everybody, and it's not right. Like, it is not right. It's just real. Everybody has their feeling some kind of way. He is coming off of a huge year. I'm curious to see if Malik Beasley ends up in the NBA this year.
This whole thing sounded strange to me from the beginning. And this is breaking news, so I haven't been able to go back and read all of the details of when it initially came out. I think it was maybe mid-June or early July. But it was back in 2023, 24. And it was a Malik Beasley, I believe, over on rebounds or assists. And it was the bet. It was an over on it was a prop bet. But he didn't hit it. it was an under, or maybe the bet was the under. And I apologize. I'm bumbling this here because I'm trying to find the details, but I believe maybe they bet on the under and he hit the over. Well, okay. Well, if the bet was on the under and he was really trying to fix games, or he was, putting little whispers in his friends' ears of like, hey, look, take the under, take the under, take the under. Wouldn't he do everything in his power to hit that under? Why would he hit that over? So there weren't enough details, at least from what I knew and what was initially reported, to say, oh, yeah, that smells fishy. There's plenty of things in sports that we can say, yeah, that smells fishy. I go back to Alabama's old baseball coach several years ago. He bet on LSU to win. In an LSU-Alabama baseball matchup when Paul Skeens was playing. He pulled his starter 10 minutes, 30 minutes before first pitch, put in a guy who hadn't pitched in a long time. Like, that smells fishy to me. And he was in fact fired and proven guilty of that. But the details of this didn't feel fishy enough to me. So if he is in fact innocent, I'm glad that he was proven so.
At least one prominent U.S. sportsbook detected unusually heavy betting interest on his statistics beginning in January of 2024. An industry source pointed to a game between the Bucks and the Trailblazers on January 31st. The odds on Beasley recording fewer than 2.5 rebounds moved significantly before the game, shortening from about plus 120 to minus 250 due to a surge of action. Beasley finished with 6 rebounds, and the bets that were deemed unusual all lost, to your point. He was investigated because, as we say on the show a lot, guardrails work. They notice when there's heavy action. So he was investigated because of the heavy action. That doesn't change the fact that he's also being sued by multiple lenders at this point. Beasley's got a lot going on in his life, but he's been cleared. And the question is, will the NBA let him back in?